Hey everyone, Charlie here, and welcome to a quick version of Learn to Play Piano with Charlie, where today we're going to be answering a quick question by a viewer. And the question is, when you're improvising, how can you keep progressing without being repetitive? That's a really good question. This question is from Dustin Holland. Before we start and get to this question, do me a favor, hit the like, favorite, subscribe, notification bell, everything. Leave a comment, share with 55 other people, and we'll then move on. But first, coffee. All right, so how do you progress without being repetitive when you're improvising? That's a really great question. What can oftentimes happen with people, especially when you're kind of like starting out with improvising, is that you'll play something and then you'll just kind of play the same thing again, and then it just kind of drags out and it sounds not great. So for example, maybe you're playing something, you know, like let's say you're really starting out and you're just playing something in C. Maybe you put a G. Then you just do it again. And again. And it kind of drags out and it gets, it gets boring fast, and it just kind of it sounds like an improv. Like, now ideally, when we are improvising, the key, the goal, the ultimate goal is to make it not sound like an improvisation, right? You want the improvisation to sound like it was a piece that was written down, edited over the course of many years, and is practiced and is perfect, right? That's what you want it to sound like. So how does a piece sound like that, right? I think one of the big things to make a piece, an improv, sound like a piece is that it has to have a structure. In the sense that it has to have a beginning and a middle and an end, or a beginning and like it has to go somewhere. Even if it's a short piece or if it's a long piece, it's got to have a point, right? Like it's, you know, it starts off and then maybe it has a climax and then maybe it comes back down, or maybe it ends at the climax. It has to have a direction, a point, a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? If you were reading, it's like a book. If you were reading a book and it was like, Billy went to school, Billy was at school, Billy stayed at school, and then Billy had lunch, and then Billy was at school, and then Billy came home from school. Like, that would be so boring. But even that has like a little bit of a point, right? Like he went to school, he had lunch, and came home. But that would be a lousy book. Now, if the book had like a point, right? Like there's an issue, there's a problem. There's a protagonist, Billy, and then he has a problem. He's dealing with a bully at school, and the bully's been picking on him. But then, you know, he is nice to the bully, and the bully becomes friends with him, and, you know, whatever. At least there's like a conflict and then like a resolution. Like there's a point. So in music, we want that too. And not necessarily that everything has to be like bad and then like it's rough in the middle and then works out nice and pretty at the end. It doesn't have to be like that, but it has to have kind of a point, a structure. So if a piece doesn't have one, or an improv doesn't have one, it'll just kind of just flounder. And that's, I think, kind of what Dustin's getting at here. It gets repetitive. So one way to kind of force yourself out of that is to keep in mind that you want to have a structure, and then figure out ways to make that happen. So for example, if you're starting off with that intro that kind of wandering intro in C major, maybe say, okay, I'm going to do that for a while, but then force yourself into something completely different, like a B section, right? If you guys are into music or sonata form, you know, like ABA or ABACA, the different sections, right? Force yourself into a different section, and then maybe come back to that original thing. That way, at least, if anything, you'll have the beginning and the end be kind of similar. You'll have a rudimentary structure, right? Like the beginning and the end are the same. You do something different in the middle, but then it's like, okay, there's a beginning, something happened, and then it comes back to like the beginning / end. Doing something like that, forcing yourself out of your original, you know, whatever theme, can be helpful. So for example, you might have started off with this, but you're in your head, you know that after you're done with this a few times, a couple times, you're going to force yourself out into something completely different. And then you can back to whatever you had. It's super simple, but you can kind of take that and extrapolate, right? So forcing yourself out of whatever kind of rut or groove that you kind of formed yourself in can help. Now, it's easier said than done, but keep it in the back of your mind. Think, okay, I'm going to start with my main theme, but I'm going to force myself into something completely different, and then maybe come back to that main theme. As you progress, maybe what you can do is it doesn't have to be that explicit or that abrupt, right? It can be more gradual. But keeping in the back of your mind kind of a few main things can help. So that exercise is one way to kind of, or I don't know if you should call it an exercise, but what I just described, forcing yourself out of a rut into a different section, then coming back to it maybe, is a good way to kind of just maybe help you get started on that route. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that when you're actually improvising all the time. If you keep a couple things in the back of your head while you're improvising, I think it can help. One, think about how long you want your improv to be. Is it a 3-minute piece? Is it a 10-minute piece, right? Whatever. So you can kind of think, okay, this is the length I have. So between here and here, I have to say something, have a point, right? A beginning, a middle, and an end. So once you keep that in the back of your mind, and always kind of think where you are along that line, right? So if you're playing a 10-minute improv and you're 7 minutes in, you should probably be working up to a climax or something if you're going to do that, right? And maybe thinking about coming back around to the main theme or coming back to the beginning if you want to tie it together that way. Keeping kind of a mental map of where you are along the timeline of the piece you're playing is probably a good thing. When I'm doing improvs, one of the big things that I think of is, well, how much time do I have? If I only have 3 minutes, I can't be doing a 20-minute long improv. So I want to be able to make a piece that makes sense in 3 minutes. If you're doing a 10-minute piece, 3 minutes in, you might still be kind of getting warmed up and working, building things up that'll come together more later. If you're in a 3-minute piece, by the 3-minute mark, you should be wrapping it up. So anyway, those couple things can be helpful too. So keeping in mind how long you have and where you are along that timeline. And also remembering that you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has to have some kind of a point. And again, it doesn't have to be just 3 parts. When I say beginning, middle, end, I don't mean that it has to be beginning part, middle part, end part. No, it can, you can shape it in different ways, but it has to have a point. I guess it has to have a point. I guess that's the point. Anyway, okay, hope that was helpful, Dustin. And be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, comment, and all that stuff. Let me know if you guys have questions below, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.